Hello everybody and welcome back to Whiskey Lore. I'm Drew Hanish and today we are going to be talking about Laphroaig. Laphroaig is my favorite Scotch whiskey, the 10-year-old specifically. There is always a bottle of this in the house. And unlike, well, maybe like a chain smoker, first time I saw somebody light a cigarette off of another one, I was like, wow, okay, you are serious. So this is the last dram out of my last bottle. This is my new bottle. So I've decided to place it in my little Laphroaig 2019 mini Glencairn. I guess that's a Glencairn. Does it say Glencairn? It doesn't, but it's close. It's sort of like a hybrid. It's almost like a little shot glass on top of that. But it's dated to let me remember when I went to Laphroaig. So I've got my Laphroaig in there waiting for me. And here, my brand new bottle. And the reason why I'm showing you this brand new bottle is because if you're going to do a Laphroaig Distillery tour, which is what this episode is about, you want to start by buying some Laphroaig. You don't have to, but it's kind of a cool thing to do. You buy this. I say you don't have to because you can do what I'm about to tell you at the distillery, but that's what they told me, at least anyway. You open this sucker up, and you're going to pull out two things. You're going to get this little booklet, and you're going to get this lovely bottle of Laphroaig 10-year-old. And when you look through here, you're going to find out that you can actually go to their website, laphroaig.com/plot, and you are going to get a chance to own your own rent-free square foot of turf in Scotland. And so the cool thing, you go in, it's got a little number there, you go on the website, you plug that in, you sign up for an account, and then it will tell you and show you on a Google map where your plot of land is. It'll give you the coordinates. Now the reason why I say that rather than going in and maybe signing up for your plot of land when you first get there, doing it this way instead and buying this is because when I got there, they said, well, we've got some construction going on at the moment and the computer's down and we can't tell you what your coordinates are. So I went all the way to Islay and I was not able to go plant my flag, which is what you get to do. Grab a flag, go out and plant your country's flag in your plot of land. So it would have been better had I pinpointed it on my Google Maps because you could do that through their website. And then that way I would be able to find my plot of land. But just something really cool to do when you're going to go. I love little extra experiences. I mean, the first episode I did was on Maker's Mark, and what I didn't tell you during that episode, because I didn't know about it until after I recorded the episode, is that you can join their Ambassadors Club, and there is a cask of whiskey with your name on it, which I think is a really cool thing. So you may go check that out on the Maker's Mark website. But this was cool with Laphroaig, and actually it just sort of endeared them to me just that much more. So let's talk about the tour and what's going to happen. First of all, getting to Islay can be a little bit of a challenge. You can fly in. I decided to drive a car across Scotland, and when I got to Kennaicraig, there are ferries that will go to Port Askaig or to Port Ellen. Port Ellen is where Laphroaig, Ardbeg, and Lagavulin are. Lagavulin, I'll get the name right. And so that's where I decided to stay. There's lots of places you can stay. Beaumore, or they pronounce it Beaumore. You could stay there if you wanted to. And so there's some options for what you're going to do. But I think, you're going to have to pay the fee to get across, whether you fly in or whether you take the Calmac ferry across. Once you get across, you get there. What's really cool at Laphroaig, and with all three of those distilleries being right in a row from each other, if you stay in Port Ellen, park the car, stay in Port Ellen, and you can walk down this beautiful pathway that goes first to Lagavulin, then, wait, is that right? No, it goes first to Laphroaig, then it goes to Lagavulin. It ends for a second in front of Lagavulin, and then that path starts again and goes to Ardbeg, and it's about a mile in between each of them. So in total, you're talking about 3.5 to 4 mile walk. But you see the seashore. It's a beautiful walk. So unless of course it's raining, which in Scotland and Islay, I have heard that it rains there some. It did not rain for me. It was beautiful, sunny, breezy. It was an excellent day in early April. But that's how you're going to have to get there. That's how you can get around on foot. That was great for me because I ended up going to all 3 distilleries in the same day. I don't know if I would recommend that, especially since I did the Ian MacArthur Lagavulin warehouse tour where you're drinking cask strength whiskey. Oh, man. I had that, then I went over to Ardbeg, and in the Ardbeg episode, I'm going to praise them big time because they had canceled my tour, but then told me to come anyway. And what they did for me was fantastic. So I'll have nothing but praise for them when I get around to the Ardbeg episode. But man, a lot of drinking on that walk. That was the one day in Scotland when I probably drank a bit more. I don't like getting sauced because you can't really enjoy the whiskey so much. You can enjoy the drunkenness from the whiskey, but to me, whiskey is an experience of smelling it and tasting it. If you've never had Laphroaig before, I would not suggest starting with this unless you take my handy dandy tip. And my handy dandy tip is, if you've ever had any other scotch that's not an Islay scotch, and you are about to try your first Islay scotch, wipe everything out of your brain that you know about the flavor and the smell of scotch. Because on the island of Islay, they get the heat for their malting and the smoke for their malting from peat. And other distilleries in Scotland will do this to a certain extent, but not to the extent that they do it in Islay. And the reason they started doing it there was because they needed a fuel source, and that was the most readily available fuel source. So it really creates a distinctive flavor in those whiskeys. And most people will say, and there's a whole campaign at Laphroaig around this, that people either love it or they hate it. I'm on the love it side. I was not on the love it side for Islay whiskeys when I first started out because they were just too aggressive. There was a lot of iodine in the water. You'll hear people say it has a medicinal kind of a flavor to it. Yeah, they all have that kind of medicinal seaside. Laphroaig says seaweed. And so it really does create a very different flavor. But my story that I want to tell you is that I went up to Washington, D.C., was hanging out with a friend of mine. He was drinking wine, and I ordered a Laphroaig, and he said, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "It's Scotch." And he says, "Well, I don't really like Scotch. I had a bad experience with it." Haven't we all had a bad whiskey experience somewhere along the line? But he said, I don't really like Scotch. I kind of avoid it. So I said, well, you might want to take a sip of it when I get it. So they poured it, took a sip of it. Before he took that sip, though, I said, prepare yourself, because this is not going to be, the reason I think you are going to like this is because it doesn't taste like other Scotch. Think of other Scotch, usually when you drink something and somebody says Scotch, you hear of a lot of sherried versions and you hear a lot of bourbon versions. And those are the casks and barrels they're using to store the whiskey. And what'll happen is you get kind of used to those kind of flavors being in your whiskey. Well, once you get this, the phenols from this Islay whiskey, it just cancels all that out and says, here I am, I'm a different flavor. So I said, don't think of this as a sweet whiskey. Think of it as a savory whiskey. So this is more your beef brisket than it is your after dinner chocolate. And he tasted it and he said, oh, that's pretty good. And then after a while, I noticed he wasn't drinking his wine, and I said, "Why aren't you drinking your wine?" And he said, "I'm still kind of living the experience of that Laphroaig." So he got it right off the bat. But I think what helped him was not trying to compare it to other scotches that he'd tried before, because it is very different. And if you've ever tasted something, Beaujolais is a good example for me. It's very fruity. The one that I purchased was very fruity. I opened it, I'm like, wow, that smell is amazing. Sweetness. I taste it, it was extremely dry. And I just did not like it at all. Because my palate was ready for one thing, I ended up with something else. So anyway, that's enough about Laphroaig and the tasting side of things. Let's talk about the tour and what went on. So you start out in the museum, and you get to learn a bit about their history. You learn about the two brothers that started out the distillery, Alexander and Donald Johnston. And Donald ended up taking the distillery over because he wanted to really protect it and make sure it stayed in the family. And unfortunately, after he did that, he fell in a boiling pot of pot ale and boiled to death, which is not something I think I'd ever want to go. I don't even want to think about it. Drowning's bad enough. Burning in a fire is bad. Sorry, I'm getting depressing. But yeah, not a good story. So anyway, the distillery still existed. Up in Prohibition, there was a guy named Ian Hunter who took over, and you'll hear all these stories. They're really good at telling the stories on this tour. And Ian Hunter was the one who tried to bring it across the ocean. And he came to the United States in the middle of Prohibition, and he got the license to be able to sell it as a medicinal whiskey. And again, if you ever smell an Islay whiskey, you may go, wow, that does. It smells like the iodine is right out there and in your face. And I thought of Band-Aids the first time I smelled it. So, and I know that doesn't sound like a great smelling note, but and it actually did turn me off from drinking Islay whiskey for a little while, but once you get used to it, it helps. So you do that, you go through that process of hearing the history and all of that, and they walk you through, and I actually got to throw peat into the fire, which was cool. They do cold smoke so it doesn't get as hot, but when you throw that peat in there, sparks will fly. And you won't get that on every tour, but we just got lucky on our tour and had a chance to do that. So that was a pretty cool experience. Got to taste the barley. They have the maltings there. They do 15% of their maltings there. The rest comes from Port Ellen, who supplies a lot of the different distilleries with their malted barley. But it's cool. They still have it on site. And in fact, that's why they have this little royal seal up here from Prince Charles, because they still cut their own peat, and they still are smoking their own barley, malting their own barley that way. So you have to do that to be able to get this seal, and so they have that, and they have to renew it every 3 years, so hopefully it will remain there for a while. They're going to keep on doing what they need to do. So if you go on a tour, you should expect to see some of these things along the way. So they let you take pictures throughout the whole thing. It was cool when we got to a certain point. They walked us outside and let us see the swans and the white sides of the buildings. And you'll notice in Islay that almost all the distilleries have white sides to their buildings with black letters on them. And she said that the reason they did that was because way back when ships were sailing by, merchant ships, they would be able to spot something about the landform or some kind of iconic piece of the landscape or a building or something and see the white side of the building and know that there's a distillery there, and they should stop and pick some up and take it back to the mainland. So I thought that was a cool story. They also showed that the pot stills were flushing out into the pot ale out into the water, and there were swans that were sitting there. They said dolphins have actually come up there and drank that. There's a 1% of whiskey in that water that gets flushed out of there, but it's the warmth that actually draws them out there. So that's cool. Great opportunity for some pictures out there right in the middle of your tour. You get to see the pot stills, you get to go into the dunnage warehouse, warehouse number 1, and you get to smell the angel's share, and that's always a big piece for me. And then they'll take you in, you get to do the tastings. I told you, or I may not have told you, they give you this little necklace when you go in, and there's 3 little clips on there, and those are credits towards whatever you're going to get to drink. And so if it's higher content in alcohol or a more expensive dram, then you're probably going to use 2 of those rather than 1. I wanted to try the cask strength 10-year-old. It was really good, but I had to use 2 of my credits for that. The lore was also 2 credits. So, you know, you got to make a decision at some point which one you're going to go with. But the ones, and I wrote them down just so I'd remember, the ones they give you an opportunity to try are the cask strength, which is 58% alcohol, Select, which they refer to as the gateway to Laphroaig because it's a bit sweeter, it's not got as much smoke to it. The quarter cask, which I've had before, it's similar to this, although they age it for 8 years and then they put it into a smaller cask, which gives it much more of the caramel and vanillas of the bourbon barrel that they put it in. I didn't like it as much as I like this, but I mean, it was a matter of degrees. So if you like bourbon, you may end up liking the quarter cask a little more. Lore is a range of 7 to 21-year-old whiskey, all mixed together into one. So it's got the new, it's got the old. The 4 oak and the triple wood, those are both a little sweeter finish on those. So those are the ones you get to choose between. And secret, I actually asked for the lore, and they gave me the lore for 1 ticket. So that was nice of them to do. Don't tell them I told you that they did that for me. But that was very nice. And so I enjoyed the tour. That was fantastic. And like I say, if you're going to go, make a day of it. Probably choose one of the other distilleries there to go to and do a deeper experience with one or the other. When I go back, I will do a deeper experience at Laphroaig because, again, being my favorite distillery or being my favorite whiskey, that is something I definitely want to try out. And staying in Port Ellen, that's a good idea. It's close by, you can walk down to it and just have a great time. So I hope this is helpful information for you. You can go out and check out Instagram.com/whiskey-lore. I put an E in it, and you can see the pictures of all the different places that I've gone, get some teasers for some of the episodes that are coming up. Hope you're enjoying these, and leave comments. Let me know what you thought of Laphroaig if you've gone yourself, and what your favorite whiskeys are, and where I should be going. And I will see you on the next episode.